All right, so we've been drawing rectangular and square and box objects so far, and today we're going to focus on drawing ellipses. Ovals, circles, big, small, those are ellipses, okay? A great example of objects that you're going to use are jars, votives, candles, bottles. I've got this little pot piece right here. I have a bottle and some other things in front of me that I'm going to draw from. I just have this as an example for you, okay? Because when we look at an ellipse straight on, all right, it's like looking at a cylinder. Its basic shape is still a rectangle, all right? But when you see it at a bit of an angle, right? That's when those curves start coming into play. And this is where our ellipse is. So, to get started, I have all of my materials to my side. I've got my measuring stick, I've got my fine charcoal, my compressed charcoal, my hard eraser, my kneaded eraser, a chamois or paper towel. You can see I went ahead and got mine really dirty already. That way it works a little better for me. And we're gonna start by toning our paper. Now remember, when you tone your paper, you're going to wanna work your fine charcoal in circles until you cover the entire surface. And then you're gonna take your chamois, your fabric, or your paper towel, and you're going to also work this in small circles until you get a nice middle gray tone, okay? Now your chamois, if you're using a paper towel, I like to build it up a little bit. It makes it so that it doesn't pull up as much as a clean paper towel does, okay? Use that to your advantage. It might take a few layers to get the tone that you would like, but I'd like you to try to get it towards a middle gray value, okay? Now, I have 3 objects in front of me. I will post a picture of the objects in your handout. What I'm gonna start doing is I'm gonna start mapping. Now, what's been happening is we haven't really been including ground and foreground and background in our drawings. So to do mapping, I'm going to always start with my rule of 3 grid, okay? And I know that the edge of my table is gonna be kind of up here, and I'm gonna start laying in the shapes of my objects, all right? And you can use your kneaded eraser and reductively, you can use your chamois, you can use your charcoal and work additively, okay? But again, I'm gonna start differentiating. So the ground in my drawing is darker than my background, so I'm gonna go ahead and put that in. And by ground versus background is what I mean, okay? I'm putting in the surface of my table. Then I'm going to take my kneaded eraser and I'm gonna start finding basic shapes. Now it's like what I said with this, right? The basic shape of a cylinder is a rectangle still, okay? So I'm going to start with one of my larger shapes, which is a coffee canister. And it's a rectangle because it's a cylinder. It's a little bit wide, but there's my rectangle. And then I've got a bottle that comes over it. So I'm going to, now I'm going to show you really quickly, right? Bottle, okay? So when I look at a bottle like that, there's the rectangular shape. And so you don't get confused, I'm gonna differentiate the two here. There's the rectangular shape, and then there's the top of it, and it kind of comes down, like an upside down Y. But I started with that rectangle, okay? And then I've got a small candle in between them all, which is right here. And you can see, again, I'm drawing my shapes into each other. I'm really only bringing my pencil in to help differentiate, okay? So I've got my 3 shapes, again, so you can see, they can all be broken down into rectangles, all right? And I made sure to include my background. Now, what I'm gonna do, because I've got shapes, is I'm gonna start developing form. That means instead of just a rectangle, I'm gonna show the lid, similar to how I would show the lid of a box, okay? Measuring sticks, all right? Use them. It's the same in theory, okay? It's the same lid, it's the same concept. So I can see the top of this one. And it's got some little stripes that go down it. It has a seam. And then it goes back in space. Right, so you can see I'm bringing in my curves. I'm gonna start drawing in some of my shadows. Okay. Now, there's an interesting method that I like to call the coil method, and it's when you're doing a bottle to keep your ellipses even. You can kind of spiral through the whole shape and then bring in your outlined edge. All right, it's not always effective. It's up to you which one you want to use. Now I know that the top of this is a little bit bigger. You can see I'm drawing through my objects to draw what makes them themselves, okay? So I'm including things like the labels that I see. I'm including things like the edges of the tin, and I'm using the side of my tools, right? Okay, I'm using the side of my tools again, because what's happening is when I use the side of them, and I carve out space, we see how quickly my drawing comes together, right? It looks like I'm a lot further along than I am because I'm really pushing my value and pushing my depth. Now at this point, a lot of us have gotten to this point in our drawings before. I need my compressed charcoal, right? Because right now I've got about a dark gray, these are close to mid gray, and some light grays. I'm really not going far on my value scale. So I need to start telling myself what's gonna be my darkest dark. For me, it's gonna be this shadow that the bottle is casting, okay? So I'm taking my compressed, and I'm going in tiny circles, right? Then I can use my chamois to blend it out, right? You can see how I hold it with my pointer finger a little bit. And just tiny circles, okay? Making sure my shadow shows. Now my compressed is hard to erase, so I'm careful about getting it really close to some of these objects. Leaving a good crunchy edge there where that shadow is. Bringing it up a little bit into that object, and I can erase back out to make sure I don't lose my ellipse, right? I can draw with my eraser. And then I'm gonna start doing kind of, again, comparison, all right? Is this shadow lighter or darker than that one? Well, there's a little bit up in here, but then it's lighter. So I'm gonna use my vine charcoal to blend that out. I'm gonna make sure I don't lose this edge by going back and forth with both my eraser and my charcoal, additive and reductive, okay? Now, the interesting thing about an object like this is, well, one, they're reflective. So if you've got really sharp highlights, you want to paint those or draw those, okay? But when you look at something that's rounded, it has a very dark edge, but the shadow curves with it. So your darkest spot is not normally right on the edge. There's usually, if it's glass, a little bit of a highlight. So you'll see as I start shading the object itself in, I'm gonna leave that little highlight there, right? Do you see what I mean? And then I'm going to kind of erase out some other little highlights because my object is shiny. To make sure I don't lose my edge there, I'm gonna take some of my compressed in. I'm not gonna go as dark as my darkest dark. That's because I'm pushing my full range of value, okay? But I'm gonna follow that curve. I'm just gonna keep working this, all right? Until I get my full range of value. Now, see how quickly I can erase this side out because I'm still doing vine charcoal. And now I have a horizon on this side, but I don't on that, okay? I wanna make sure that I don't lose that horizon edge, okay? I wanna be able to show foreground, midground, background, all right? I'm just gonna kind of keep going with shading within my object, okay? When we talk about building form and changing these from just weird rectangular shapes to actual, like, dimensional form bottles, we're talking a lot about making sure that we're finding all the small shapes in our objects, okay? I'm gonna make this my light source over here. And not everything needs to be blendy, okay? You can see I'm pulling in my eraser a little bit. I'm leaving some streaky marks. This is pretty dark where it hits the shadow. And I'm just trying to create some edges and some depth. And not everything, like I said, needs to be blendy. It's just about finding value and making sure, right, when I add that shade in there, those objects get really close to each other. So I want to make sure that we can differentiate them. Creating clean edges and dynamic lines. Okay. working on this. So, that's how I'm going to build up my objects. All right. I hope you found this helpful. Please watch, or please read the handout as well as working with this. Okay. Thank you.